The use of AI deepfakes seems to be on the rise. You may have seen the recent deepfake of money-saving expert Martin Lewis, which involves a scam investment. The video and the content within it is all fake.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Intelligent Tech. My name is Tom and this is Isabel, and we sit here in the corporate and leverage finance team at CMS. We're joined today by Mansoor Ahmed-Renders, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and specifically trust and how that issue is dealt with. We're really excited to have you here today, Mansoor. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to start by telling us a bit about yourself and OpenOrigins?
Sure, yeah. I'm Mansoor Ahmed-Renders. I am the founder of OpenOrigins. Before I started OpenOrigins, I was an academic. I did my PhD and postdoctoral research at University of Cambridge, where I was looking into computer security and distributed computing. How do you make a network of computers agree on values when they're being attacked by adversaries? That was sort of the broad theme of my research. When I was doing my PhD, deepfakes had just been invented. And at that time, people saw it as a curiosity. Stephen Colbert made a couple of videos about it and made fun of Donald Trump. But for me, it was an immediate alarm bell situation. I saw the technology and I was like, this is going to be really, really bad for society at large. And so I switched tracks a little bit in my research and I started looking into doing deepfake detection. Quickly realized that deepfake detection is not a sustainable solution. Once you start making good detectors, you end up making better generators and the cycle continues. And I realized that we needed different tools. We needed ways to prove photos and videos are real, that they're not generated by AI, and so that they can be trusted again. Which is why I left academia, I started OpenOrigins, and that's what we do. We make tools to make photos and videos trustworthy again.
And specifically, you have this product, Frankly. Could you talk a bit about that and how that fits into the OpenOrigins story?
Yeah, so OpenOrigins is sort of the mothership. Frankly is an app that we've made. And this is to sort of expose everyday individuals to this technology that helps you prove photos and videos. Our customers are usually large enterprises. But we think that for maintaining a healthy internet, the tools cannot be constrained to just large enterprises. Everyone needs to be able to use these tools to prove their stories, whether they're citizen journalists or body positivity influencers. And so we've released Frankly for free on the App Store. You can go to franklyapp.com, download it, use it, prove your stories.
Great. Like you say, I think deepfakes pose a lot of risks to a lot of our clients, a lot of whom are banks and financial institutions. In your sort of opinion, how can banks and financial institutions mitigate against their risks of deepfakes?
Sure, yeah. I think deepfakes are obviously a very specific kind of generative AI.
Yeah.
There's other kinds of generated images and videos that are also a concern. I am a lot more sort of involved with the insurance sector rather than the banking industry. So I'll speak a little bit about that, and I think many of those lessons will be transferable to the banking industry as well. If you're an insurance company, let's say you sell car insurance, you have some sort of a claims process. You've got a dent in your Innova, Toyota, whatever, and you need to get some refund for that. What the bank will usually do is, make you call their call center. Then they'll maybe ask for photos, which you email them, and then they'll look at the photos. And if the claim is below a certain threshold, they'll just fulfill it. They're not going to do any checks because it's not worth the cost of doing the checks.
Yeah.
And that process worked fine when the cost in terms of time and effort of photoshopping your car to look like it has a dent was really high. Right? But once we get to this point where you can just upload a photo to Midjourney and ask it to put a dent in the front left bumper of your car, the cost is basically zero. Right? I can get this Midjourney subscription for $5 a month. I can make as many claims as I want. And because I know that these insurance companies are not doing any checks on claims below a certain threshold, I can be fairly sure that I'm going to get away with it. So insurance companies are kind of freaking out about this, right? Because the lowered cost completely changes the dynamics of what is worth investigating and what is not worth investigating. And genuinely, the way these companies are structured, they can't investigate everything. It just doesn't work. It's not economically feasible. So what we need is a way to trust the content that the customer is uploading to them. Right? And that's part of the solution that we offer. We created a mobile SDK. Think of it as a plugin to a mobile app. And these insurance companies can use our SDK, embed it within their apps, so that when photos are being taken, we can prove that these photos are real, that they've not been manipulated in any way, that they're live and at the location that they say they were taken at. Right. All of this means that it is essentially impossible for a fraudulent claim to come via one of these images. Right. Without this technology, I really do worry about both insurance and banking and how they're going to basically continue with their existing workflows.
And Mansoor, to what extent does blockchain technology play a role in kind of proving the provenance and the trust associated with those images?
Yeah.
How does that work in the picture of what you're explaining?
Yeah, so blockchains are interesting. There's two parts to this puzzle. Right? One is, do you trust the camera that took this photo? Do you trust this camera that's recording me? Right? And part of the solution is that I have embedded some software in that camera that makes me believe that this is a real camera, not a simulation, and that the light that's hitting it is being accurately represented on the digital side. Right? So that's why we need that mobile app. But that's not enough, right? That photo then needs to get transmitted to some database somewhere, and then it needs to get stored, and then it needs to be reviewed. How do you make sure that it does not get manipulated along the way? How do you make sure that some sort of an adversary in your database has not manipulated your files? If you're a large news organization, you've got a massive archive, petabytes of data that you've never gone back and checked to see if someone has manipulated or not. How can you be sure in a generative AI world that all of the content, let's say all the speeches from 1980, were actually speeches from 1980 and not a generated representation of those speeches? And that's where the blockchain comes in. Right? A blockchain gives you a very nice way to keep track of things in an immutable manner. Once something gets uploaded to the blockchain, it cannot be changed. Right? And I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of different kinds of blockchains. We use a private blockchain. And we use it to solve exactly that problem. Every time we take a photo or a video, or we go to a database and we're trying to vet them, we take a signature of those pieces of content, we put it on the blockchain, and then if anything gets manipulated, it is immediately detected.
Right. And so would you say that, in your opinion, it's likely that there are a vast number of businesses in the world at the moment that have a whole lot of data that perhaps isn't being kept in like the most appropriate way for this kind of advance of AI technology in the way in which they and others will make decisions in the future? And so there might be a need for businesses to perhaps, change the way that they're collecting or storing that data.
This is kind of like the new ransomware. 6-7 years ago, we had the whole ransomware attacks, and security officers everywhere panicked and scrambled and figured out a way to stop ransomware. It took us a while. Lots of companies got devastated by it, but eventually we figured it out. But the way databases are structured is that they're trying to stop people from deleting content. They're trying to stop people spying on you. Not a lot of them are structured to stop people from uploading content. Right? Like once they're inside the database, there are no alarms that are going to get triggered if I just uploaded another photo, because what does it matter? Right? Now it matters, because generative AI means that I can create false images and flood your entire database with them so that you can't trust even the real stuff that's in there. Right? And this is obviously a problem for a news organization. Right? I want to write a story about something that happened in 1992, and I want to pull images from 1992. But I don't know if those are the real ones or they are the 20% fake content that's been put in there by an adversary. And I feel like there is a sort of shrinking window of opportunity here. Once generative AI becomes sophisticated enough that you and I can't tell it apart, especially in video form, well, it's too late. Right? We don't know if an adversary has been in your database. We don't know if an adversary has already done this. So it's too late to secure it. So companies that don't do this securitization of their databases in the next year or two are really going to find themselves in trouble.
Yeah. So Mansoor, would you say that sort of societies trust in photography, photographic evidence will change over time, and we'll have a society of distrust when it comes to images and content that's produced.
Yeah. We have the colloquial phrase, pics or it didn't happen. And I feel like we're definitely going to go into a direction of pics and it didn't happen.
Right.
There's been estimates of how by 2030, roughly 90% of content, photographic content, will be generated by AI and not real content.
Yeah.
And once we reach that point, I don't know where the tipping point is, whether it's 2030, 2027, whatever, we're just going to look at photographs with suspicion. And my worry is that awareness is not uniformly distributed. Right? So we've seen this happen when mobile phones started becoming popular in my home country of India, where technical literacy wasn't a thing, but they had this new tool.
Yeah.
Right? And so a lot of obviously fake news that anyone in the Western world will pick out felt true to the people there because they didn't understand how WhatsApp worked. The closest parallel they had in their heads was like a news organization. Right? They're like, oh, this is coming from a news organization, so I trust it. I fear that we might think that it's a solved problem. We just don't trust things on the internet unless someone can prove the story. But that knowledge doesn't get transferred in time to developing countries where technical literacy is low. And that might result in elections getting skewed. That might result in massive scams. So I really worry about that situation.
Right. And so do you think that we're at this interesting, perhaps, period in history where like a fair bit of the content that exists in these applications and online environments that we interact with all the time, the social media applications and whatnot, is perhaps, user generated, and it hasn't been kind of created by artificial intelligence. But that in the future, we might really kind of move and look back at this period and be like, remember when everything was real, Is that where we're sort of heading? And so, do we kind of get further and further into this world of like being unable to trust things?
Yeah, certainly. I think there are some parallels to sort of the early internet. This might get a little bit technical, so please ask clarifying questions.
No,
right?
Go ahead.
In the early internet, websites were delivered to you without any sort of security or any authentication. Right? They were just HTTP, not HTTPS. Right? And that was fine for the most part. People weren't using the internet for very security critical applications. There were some businesses that felt the pain of the fact that web pages aren't secured. Banks used to be one of those.
Right.
And so they were like, okay, no, if you want to use our banking system, you need to use HTTPS, which means that it's secure, that someone in the middle could not have edited the details. They're not spying on you.
Gotcha.
Right? And so banks were at the forefront of that wave, and they developed solutions. And for the most part, most of the internet ignored this problem until it got to a tipping point where there were enough attacks, there were enough important things happening on the internet that more and more websites insisted that you use HTTPS.
Right.
And then it got to a point, I think it was in the late 2000s, where your browser started giving you warnings. It will give you a warning saying this connection is not secured or something like that. You might have seen that, right?
Okay, yeah.
And that is basically saying this website has not done its job of securing itself. And then we finally reached the final tipping point where your browser will not let you see the website at all.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think we have 20 years this time around to figure that out. So we need to sort of collapse that timeline severely, like maybe 2-3 years.
Right.
Where maybe social media websites start requiring proof that this photograph is taken from a genuine device, that there's some blockchain that's keeping track of this photo to make sure it hasn't been edited. And it starts giving you warnings whenever those proofs are not associated with it.
Yeah.
And eventually coming to a point where they just don't show you things that don't have proof.
Yeah.
Right? And given the fact that most of us are getting most of our news from social media, I think this really needs to be hastened.
Well, it's really interesting what you've said, Mansoor, and certainly I think in the context of our clients and what they do day in, day out, the lending and borrowing of money, certainly what you've said in respect of the insurance industry particularly, I think kind of tells a story that I imagine is one which is very valuable and useful as those banks make decisions to lend and those borrowers make decisions to turn up and actually look to obtain finance for whatever they're doing. And so, very, very helpful.
It's been a really interesting conversation, and I think particularly rhetoric around trust and distrust and the risks that I think everyone should be aware of. You know, it's been really insightful, so thank you so much. But is there anything that you wanted to leave our audience with? Anything that you wanted to say, or a key takeaway from this?
Yeah, I guess my key takeaway here is that AI is an interesting tool, especially generative AI. It enables a lot of new use cases. I would like to suggest a bit of caution, both in terms of how you treat photographic data right now inside of your company, in your workflows, but also around how the models that you end up using were created. Whether that AI model was trained on a good data set, a data set that was not polluted by other AI models, whether that data set has any biases, especially if you're going to use it in a security critical application that affects people's lives. AI models have been known to propagate stereotypes and biases. So I would be very mindful about replacing humans with AI models without doing that thorough check to make sure that your models are free of those issues.